Welcome to Exploring Ways to Wellness, where we investigate different approaches to well-being. With the planets literally aligning and Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune visible in the night sky at the moment, I couldn't help but make sure that this week's episode has an astrological element. So today we're diving into human design, a fascinating system that combines ancient wisdom with modern science to help us better understand ourselves and our unique energy patterns. My guest is Jacqueline Kent, who discovered this powerful tool during her own wellness journey and found it so profound that she now helps others looking to use it too. If you've ever felt that you're fighting against your natural tendencies or struggling to accept certain aspects of yourself, this conversation will be particularly interesting. Jacqueline shares how human design can serve as a permission slip to be more authentically ourselves and help us navigate life with greater ease. Let's dive in. I am so excited to have Jacqueline Kent with me today. I've always been interested in the more unconventional approaches, as you know, and one of the things that kind of has been popping up over the last couple of years in various conferences that I've been to is human design. So I was thrilled when I was sat next to Jacqueline at a recent awards ceremony, and she was able to tell me all about human design. So when I was looking for someone for the podcast, she's the first person that jumped into my mind. So the universe was on our side. So welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Sarah. It was a really serendipitous kind of like, we started talking and it was like, oh, this is a fun conversation. So yeah, it was great to meet you earlier in the year. And thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
Oh, thank you for coming. Could you share for us, just to get started, a little bit about your background and how you got started looking for a different approach to wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very, very short version of my story, because there are lots of aspects to it, is that in 2020, I pivoted. I did that pivot thing that I think quite a lot of people did. I had previously worked in the wedding industry and it was a very challenging space to be in and it hadn't been working for me. And I began to pay more attention to what were the things that I have always naturally done that have felt good for me, like being myself and helping people in a way that always seemed to come very naturally to me. And so I had already written my first book, my memoirs, which shared a lot about lessons that I had learned on my journey. And I felt that it was the time to really start stepping into that and began to explore setting up being a coach. And over probably a couple of years, it was kind of like I felt as though I didn't have an area of specialism. And it
Okay.
felt as though that was something that perhaps was missing for me. And it was actually in looking at what could support me in my business that I stumbled across human design. People often say human design found them. And that was where it all started for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. So it's interesting that you were able to identify there's a missing piece here. So what was your initial opinion when you heard about human design?
So I had already been, let's just say, in the way of the woo. I'd been doing a few
Okay.
different modalities and different things, including EFT, including exploring spiritual coaching, looking at using journaling as like a mindfulness and a kind of a therapy tool. I'd been certified as a crystal healer, so I'd done lots of other different things that had really got me to a place where it was like, there has to be something more. And in where I have done my learning, that is very much a common theme is that it comes about to people who know that they have something more to bring to the world in their own way. And it isn't, a particularly academic kind of thing. And really owning and stepping into, we all have these amazing gifts. And what are we doing with them? And how can we use them to best support, first of all, ourselves, because it has to start with you, and
Yes.
then be in a position where you're able to hold a more grounded, solid space to be able to guide and help others move through places of stuckness, places that are challenging. Um, and it just felt so right for me. When it kind of came around, it really felt as though I was being called to step in and pay more attention to it. And that's the only way I've ever been able to describe it. I felt as though I was being called.
Wow. That's amazing. So was there a specific issue that you had that you kind of led
Hmm.
you to connect in particular with that modality? Because you said you've tried other things. What was it about human design that kind
Well,
of
I mean,
really
I would say, yeah. So, in understanding more about myself, I've come to learn and really recognize that I am a lifelong learner. That is part of what inspires me to keep expanding my skill set and my knowledge. But what I was actually looking for in the moment was I'd found that there was a class being delivered by somebody, which was all about using human design to understand how you could speak to the people that were waiting to hear from you effectively. So energetically connecting with your people and understanding more about that. However, that particular training, whilst that was the thing that had me disappearing off down the rabbit hole, as I like to describe it, um, it didn't land in quite the right way. And I genuinely now really see that it was really just that it wasn't the right person to help me make more sense of it. And,
Oh, okay.
so it was I was struggling in my business in that I felt like I didn't really understand who my people specifically were. I didn't know enough about them, and I wanted to really start to be able to speak more into who they are and what their challenges were, and also seeing that often it's a journey that we've already been on ourselves. So that was a big part of it too. And the more I began talking about human design, and have you heard about human design? And it's so fascinating. Like my energy would be lit up by, every conversation I had. That little piece there was what actually had other people going, oh, I want to know more about this. And really, what is she talking about? I want to kind of understand it a bit more to be able to recognize what it is that's got us so excited.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, our listeners are already excited. What exactly is this human design?
So it is a very powerful, insightful self-knowledge system that
Okay.
brings together traditional ancient wisdom and modern science. So the thing that I love about it is it's not one of those things where you figure it out by taking some kind of test. It like you answer the question about how you are uniquely designed by entering your birth details into a chart generator. What that chart generator does is it combines the knowledges from the Hindu chakra system. It includes Eastern and Western astrology. It includes the Chinese I Ching, the Judaic Kabbalah, and quantum physics. And
Wow.
all of those, so as I say, very, very old, ancient, well known, tried and tested knowledges and wisdoms from many, 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 many years. And that science piece all come together to create what you then find as your human design chart, which gives you, it's like an energetic blueprint. And your chart, every single person's chart is unique. And everything that you see in that chart, when you can start to understand it a little bit more, helps you recognize how you are you, how you're being who you are, where you're being true to who you are, and where perhaps you might be energetically off track by the ways in which you have been conditioned, by the patterns that have been passed down genetically, by the way in which you have been influenced through the planetary transits. And that's getting a little bit more technical. But another way to describe it that has really seemed to have landed well when I've remembered to refer to it, because there's always so much to share, is actually it's also known as the science of differentiation. So it's about helping you understand how you are different to everybody else around you to help you find a way to be more you, be more authentic, be more present in your own energy. rather than always being exploring and doing things in a way that you think you should. And there's one of those little words that we don't really enjoy.
Yes. Yeah. And I love hearing you talking about it like this, Jacqueline, because if any of you out there have come across human design, you might have fallen into the trap that I did, which is, oh, this sounds very interesting. Going along, finding a website, sticking your birthday in, not completely sure what time you were born, but sticking in a kind of bit of a, random time in any way just to see if it works. Getting something out and going, yeah, okay, that sounds it might be a little bit like me. But it kind of spits out this chart that looks very complicated. You do a bit of Googling, you say, yeah, that sounds okay. And then it goes in a file with other personality quizzes or astrological quiz results that you found at some point in a kind of interesting, but not really sure how useful it is kind of way. And I really get the impression there is so much more to it.
Yeah.
So could you give an example of maybe some of the things that kind of you were able to pull out when you first did your chart and how they then helped you with any
No,
personal issues?
yeah, absolutely. So for me, as I say, so I when I first started off, it was like, wow. And then, oh, wow. Eek. And as I move through, actually learning how to make more sense of it, I read that I was in traditional human design, something known as a manifesting generator, which is an interesting language, but the the methodology that I'm trained in, it's the same system, but it's a different language for it. So it speaks more to your potential. I'm actually known as a time bender. That to me really,
Oh,
really made sense. So
wow.
in that's quantum human design because it's all about a language that operates at a higher frequency. And understanding that I am somebody who is here to do a lot, somebody who is here to multitask, somebody who always has many things on the go at once. So the very first thing that helped me to integrate that was to be able to say, what would it look like if I gave myself permission to be that person instead of being hard on myself because I've always got so many things on the go. People would
Yeah.
say to me, "Gosh, you never seem to stop." And I'd be like, "I know, it's this," and out would come the excuses. Now I'm like, "Yep, that's who I am. You know, take me or leave me. That is how I work. This is how I move through the world. I am designed to."
Yeah.
There was
That's
also
really powerful.
yeah, and it's a huge self-acceptance piece. Big fat permission slip to be more of who you are if you recognize that within the descriptions given.
Yeah.
So the next thing for me in that description, and then in a moment, what I'll do is I'll share what happens when it doesn't feel aligned, because that's
Okay.
really interesting as well. Um, so the second part for me, understanding a particular aspect of reading the chart, which is your profile lines, which are the numbers you have down the sides. It's actually relating to two of the most important ones, which sit at the very top, that I have and I have the energy for somebody who is here to learn a lot all the time. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm also somebody who is here to learn by example, by trying things out, seeing how they work, maybe not sticking with them. That's first of all, in part to do with being a manifesting generator, but second of all, to do with a three line, and that's a theme, one of many within the chart. Understanding that as somebody who is here to learn by trying things out, you have to try things out to figure out where they're going to take you and allow yourself to learn whether or not it's something you're going to run with.
Yes. Yeah.
So then that whole piece around all the different other methodologies and modalities and different things I tried and tested, and they felt good in the moment, but then I don't know, they didn't really fit, or now I bring them into my work still. So it's not, wholly just human design that I share with my clients, that it actually gave me this beautiful toolkit of all these different things I could do. And none of it then was perceived as something I did wrong or a mistake. You're actually allowing yourself to move through the world in a way that means you learn as you go. And that is absolutely okay.
That sounds amazing. And I love that idea of the permission slip that you
Mm,
can, because we
mm.
we do feel, don't we, with that judgment and part of the judgment is that we're putting on ourselves. We don't give ourselves that ability to choose. And
No.
actually, if we can recognize that that's the way our energies are set, that's the way that we're meant to be, we can
Mm.
work within that and almost celebrate that that's me.
Yeah,
That
and
this
that's
is
the
me.
thing. That's
Well,
a beautiful way that you can start to move into alignment with who you were born to be. Rather than
yeah.
trying to figure it all out all the time, you actually get to understand, oh, that's actually part of my human story. And now I get to explore it some more and have fun with that. So, just touching, as I promised, on the other aspect where sometimes people run their charts and they're like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't feel right. They know they've got
Yeah.
their time of birth right and all of that stuff. That quite often what can happen is you are so conditioned by the people who have, who perhaps you've grown up with, your birth family, or whatever environments you've spent a lot of time in. It might be a relationship you've been in where you've been learning stuff that actually, if you're conditioned by other people, you may be operating in a way that is not true for you. And when that happens, that can lead to, burnout, that can lead to you not being authentic, not being in integrity. And that can feel very uncomfortable to hear, but to hear it and then be able to say, okay, so by understanding who I am, I get to start to transition and make changes that mean I'm going to start to figure out who the story, my personal story, and what it means to be me.
And I guess that's a big change, isn't it? Both for the person realizing themselves that maybe they need to make that transition, but also for the people around them. Do you find that when you are talking to an individual where that is the case, that it's kind of it's a whole big shift and there can be some kind of
Yeah,
pushback from people around it
absolutely,
and
absolutely, yeah. And sometimes, when people are on this journey, it needs to start really with their focus being on them and not trying to make it so that it feels okay with everybody around them.
yeah,
To allow themselves that space, that breathing space to start to see, well, actually, some things are going to change and I need to steady myself and be ready to keep moving in the direction that is designed for me rather than trying still to fulfill those aspects of me that they've been so used to. It's a long, a process of what I like to call unlearning, really, because you're learning who you are and also unlearning all of the aspects of you that are not. And that can feel challenging. So it can depend on the situation, but more often than not, people have a reading because there is something and they know that something isn't right. Something is, not true for them, not landing. And they don't really know how to put words to that. So they're understanding who they are through the lens of their chart gives them that language to be able to express, well, actually, now I understand this is more about my essence of who I am. And I'm ready to start exploring what it looks like to put those shoes on, try them out for size.
yeah. And that definitely sounds like a situation where you would need, some
Support.
help, not just
Very much.
understanding your chart and understanding what this is that you're stepping into, but how to navigate
Mm,
those potential issues with those around you. So we'll come on at the end of the episode. Jacqueline's very kindly going to give me some links and things to put in the show notes, and she can talk to you at the end quickly about if you wanted to get in touch with her or somebody
mm,
like in
mhm.
order to aid your journey through this. But just going back a step, if somebody was very skeptical about an approach like this,
Mhm.
have you come across people like this that when you've spoken to them, they've been like, "Oh, she's one of those. Let's
Well,
let's explore."
yes, and I believe that there is room for all of us. And I think that your energy can be best served by standing true to what you believe in and not trying to convince people
Yeah,
because, you can help people understand. That's one thing. But by really standing in your integrity, this is something that for me is very true and feels very right and correct. It's not my job to make other people see that.
Yeah.
And so I am a quite accepting, compassionate person, and I like to have those conversations, but I also like to recognize that everybody will have their own thoughts and experiences of it. And some of that will be to do with how they interpret that energy through the lens of their chart as well. One of my the aspects of my chart is actually I have a tendency to start being like the people that I spend my time with. And that's quite a big theme for me. And understanding that has helped me recognize that actually sometimes that's going to happen even when it's not necessarily something that's true for me. So
Okay.
understanding the truth in that is really, really important.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. And do
Mm.
you find that you've kind of, as you've been working with it for a while now, that you can always almost spot people?
I love
You know,
playing that.
you meet them, you're like, I
I,
haven't run your chart, but I can already tell you're probably this."
I, I love playing that game. And actually, this is a bit of a personal share, but I watched a funeral service of somebody who I was very close to many years ago. I actually ended up watching the streaming version online. And as they were talking about her and about her life, I was feeling all the feels, but I couldn't help myself thinking that she had a one in her profile. And I bet this, and I bet, and just seeing her life playing out in this context of what she experienced and what she moved through in her life and the way that she was and how people experienced her energy. I was really, really, really moved. It was a beautiful service, so fitting and such a tribute, but also such a really profound way to see that she was true to who she was through her life, which was just incredible, incredible to hear. I think it's that thing where we'd all like to be able to say, and I've talked about this before, actually. It seems to be a theme coming up at the moment. That when we look back on our lives, we're able to say, you know, I I lived the life that I wanted to live, and it wasn't, a version of it, or it wasn't an untrue experience for my life.
Mm.
There
It
seems to be
is
a bit of a
interesting.
theme at the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people seem to be kind of searching for purpose at the moment. I don't know. I
Yeah.
I I personally found, the experience of lockdown quite an
Mm.
interesting opportunity to kind of stand back and look at myself and say, "Okay, well, this is an opportunity to kind of think, where am I now? Where do I want my life to go?" And I actually made a lot of changes as a result of that. And
What?
I think that's been replicated a lot of times. People are kind of looking for where they're going, and in not really being sure, there's the opportunity to kind of look back and say, "Well, hang on, where have I come from?"
Mm.
And this and I guess human design can work within that, and obviously we've got the new year, so
Yeah,
another
absolutely.
opportunity for people to be kind of say, "Well, what do I want the year to look like?" And when they feel like it's not quite right, or they're not sure in terms of direction,
Mhm.
then it could be an opportunity for them to better understand themselves and then make sense of the world within that lens
Mm.
that help propel them forward.
Just that big question, what does it all mean? And it's trying to find an answer to that feels befitting to you. And you can go on all kinds of different journeys. And much like you, I most certainly went on that journey through 2020 and some of 21. That was when I kept going into like getting new certifications for things because I was figuring out what I wanted to do and what it was going to look like. And I also did EFT, which has come back around as part of the work that I do with clients. So it's very much, does my life, the one that I am living right now, does it mean what I want it to mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
And were there any kind of unexpected shifts or experiences you had as a result of understanding yourself better with that human design?
Think as much as anything, it has been about really accepting myself for who I am. And that might sound like a strange thing to be surprised by, but I think it's one of
I
those.
think that's a common issue.
Yeah, if you're a thinker, I'm a thinker that I'm always trying to figure things out. But actually, when I've got this powerful information in front of me and I'm integrating and moving through it as I move through the world, I'm going, actually, I quality about me. And I understand that it's true for me and it's part of who I am. So instead of denying myself the things that I perhaps was telling myself were a flaw or were, something that I needed to make better, instead, I've just found peace in it. I've
Oh,
just
that's
found that
beautiful.
sense of peace of being who I am and helping people around me, with my husband on his chart and his understanding of himself and all of that stuff. And it's been a really big lesson in our relationship as well to really understand how we work together and what goes on with our energy sometimes and why.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are brilliant to know about yourself and, whoever you spend your time with to be able to do it in a way that is healthy.
Yeah, yeah, that's so important. What a
Mm.
beautiful message, and I'm excited for you that you've discovered this wonderful way of moving forward. You
Mm.
touched on the fact there were other modalities that led you to this. If
Mhm.
you were to kind of recommend to somebody looking at alternative approaches, would you just say that human design is the ultimate or in your experience, or are there other things that led you to it? Or you mentioned there's other things you sometimes incorporate with clients, but
Yeah.
personally on a kind of day-to-day level, is there anything else that you incorporate within your wellness
Yeah,
technique?
so journaling is a big, big factor for me and always has been actually. So part of the way in which I have come to where I am has been really embracing what I used to do when I was younger that perhaps I stopped finding time for, or it, other life kind of got in the way, to really embrace doing more of that. And I started writing a diary from the age of about 14. And it's actually been something that I use myself, but I also use with clients. It's a really great way to understand what's going on underneath the surface. We have a lot of prompts, what I call ponder prompts, where when you understand the theme of something that's going on in your chart, I share prompts around that help you explore what it all means. And that is really, really powerful. But the main thing that I would say, and this applies to anybody in any circumstances, is really pay attention to how whatever it is you're exploring is making you feel. If you're
Yeah.
feeling that your energy is expanding and you're feeling, alive by the prospect and you're feeling inspired and it feels right and it sounds right and it just makes sense, then see where that takes you. Allow yourself to go on that journey rather than trying to put yourself in some kind of prescriptive box where, well, I'm this, for example, I'm this type, therefore it sounds as though I should be doing X, Y, or Z to make sure that I am living, my potential.
Yeah.
Just allow yourself to experiment.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Trying to avoid it actually adding a load more shoulds.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You're going from the shoulds that you stuck in your head and
yeah,
thinking, society is saying I should be this, that, and the
well,
other. Now I've got this, I've
I
got
think
my
that's
chart,
good.
and I've got my human design. Now I should shift it to this, these shoulds. And actually that's not the case. As you say, it's helping you understand yourself, but also what feels good, that head
Um,
body connection.
yeah. Yeah. And,
So
for
important.
some people that will feel more challenging, especially if they have not been connected really to their body
Yes.
or to their energy for a while. If they've felt disconnected, there's going to be some practice of that, playing around with it and seeing what happens. Don't just expect it to switch on like a tap because it doesn't really work like that. But also, that is something that we're seeing in the industry is, for example, I saw somebody who has only just been talking about human design for about the last 2 months. And now all of a sudden she's gone, I've got this certificate and I'm going to start teaching it. And I've gone, oh, that's really interesting. And I feel like you're going to be teaching the textbook stuff, which is all fantastic, but not from, a lived experience perspective. When you add that to it, you get to see all of the different flavors and the different ways in which the same thing can mean something different for so many people. and allow that to become part of the story rather than, the in my text it says this is how it's supposed to be. And one of the most beautiful things around the training that I've done is I'm part of a big, gorgeous community of quantum human design professionals. And we are all very generous with each other. We share our time, our knowledge, our expertise, our experiences, and do it in such a way that it's all about collaboration and us not competing with each other, which I
Yeah.
think is so, so important. And it's what we all need more of. We all need to do that thing where we're working alongside each other and not, saying, this is my space and you can't have it. Um,
Yeah.
and that has been a really beautiful thing for me in coming to this work has been I'm in a space where I don't feel like I'm, going to be up against anybody else. We all understand we're unique and therefore we all know we've got something different to bring. And it's just like pure magic. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And so that brings us on beautifully to, if people do want to find out more about their human design, what would you recommend would be the best way for them to find out more?
So you can go straight to my website and run a chart on there. And the reason I say that is because there are, as you sort of, pointed out quite early on, you can go somewhere and get the information, and then all of a sudden you'll start seeing it popping up everywhere. And you might then feel a little bit overwhelmed. So on my website, you can go where it literally says run your free chart, and it will give you a 12-page free report as well that just expands a little bit on some of the information that you need at the beginning. So that's the first piece, is really sticking with the foundations. And I also have a lot of blog posts on there, and there's various other information. And you can, obviously, then there's a contact page. You'll all be in my emails then, so I can start, communicating with you, sharing insights. I usually write one of my emails about once a week. And then if you have questions, asking a question doesn't cost anything. It's not one of those. It's like, I am always happy to share. And in doing that, you get to find out whether or not you have found the person that is the right person for you. And it might be that that isn't me, and that's absolutely fine. Um, I also have a Facebook group, which is very specifically for one of the types, which is actually about a third of the population. So it covers quite a few people, but it's the Human Design Haven for manifesting generators and creatives. And part of the reason for that is that's my energy. That's the way I move through the world. I totally get it. And I can help you recognize how to bring more of that rather than trying to, stop squashing yourself down and stop shrinking and start shining, is how I like to describe it.
I love that. Wow, it all sounds fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Jacqueline. It's been absolutely wonderful to hear more about human design and your experiences with it.
Thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute joy to share more about it. I love these conversations.
Thank you. Well, what an eye-opening conversation with Jacqueline Kent. I love how she showed us that human design isn't about piling on more rules or shoulds in our lives. It's actually the opposite. It's about giving ourselves permission to be exactly who we are. If you're curious about your own genetic blueprint, I know I was, you can grab your free human design chart through Jacqueline's website. I'll pop all those links in the show notes for you. Until next time, I'm Sarah, and remember, there's many paths to wellness, and sometimes they start with the stars.